Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about friendship, perseverance, resilience, independence, and accountability. We're talking about a children's book entitled Iyani, the Caribbean Icon. My guest today is Dr. Martha Joseph Watts, and we're talking about her newest book. Now, you guys know that I love children's authors because they are molding the minds of our little ones. So you know what I'm going to tell you? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, because we are about to get started. Thank you so much, Dr. Martha, for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dr. Angela. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Now, I want to ask you just a little bit about yourself. And, we always read bios and all of that, and that tells us a certain something, but I love to be able to kind of get the information from the author themselves. So, Dr. Martha, if you could please, when someone wants to know about who Dr. Martha Joseph Watts is, who are you in your own words?
I am a Caribbean girl. I like to say that to everyone who asks. I was born in Dominica. Dominica is a small Caribbean island between Guadeloupe and Martinique. And I resided in the U.S. Virgin Islands for about 15 years, and now I reside in Florida. I am known best for being an educator. I have taught elementary, secondary, at the university level, and now I am in a middle school where I work as a literacy coach. My job as a coach, I support teachers. I support teachers in the idea of teaching literacy. But with all of that, I also write. And so I write two kinds of books. I write for meeting the needs of my students who will need to be able to write, and I also write children's fiction. So I am all in the education business. I have been in education for almost 30 years now, and I could call myself a seasoned educator.
I love that. Now, you say that you work in literacy. Is that something that you always wanted to do? Did you always want to be a literacy coach?
Actually, I would say yes, because although I have a degree in educational leadership, which would make me a principal, and I've had that since 2005, I have never pursued a position in educational leadership. Instead, I did my doctorate in teacher training because I feel like sometimes teachers are left out, and I like the idea of being able to make things simpler for teachers, help teachers, especially new teachers coming in. We have a situation where we have teacher retention is an issue. Quite a few people come, they try the profession, and after 1 year, they're gone. After 2 years, they're gone. And so my job as a trainer is to encourage new teachers, to get them to understand the process, to get them to help them manage their classrooms, and more specifically help them with instructional strategies. And that's why I love what I do.
Well, let me tell you, I am a big advocate for giving teachers whatever they need to be successful, be it that it is more pay, smaller classroom size, a longer day or shorter day, whatever they think is best, because I tell you, your job is not easy. I've worked as a teacher's assistant for a few years, and it is definitely a labor of love, and an awesome teacher can change the life of their students. So I hear you. Thank you so much for all that you do with working with our teachers and being a teacher yourself. Thank you so much for that. Now, I like how you said that you've always wanted to write as well, that seems like it's just the next step. So I would love to talk a little bit more about your book. The Caribbean icon, Iyani, the Caribbean icon. I love the title. Did you find that while you were writing, the title kind of came out of your writings, or did the title come to you first and you simply wrote around your title?
What happened, I think it was a need right away. So I have workbooks for kindergarten students, and one of the principals asked that I put examples in there, because the writing to respond process that I created in 2009, what I do, I encourage students to read books, and then we encourage them to use critical thinking to write in response to those stories. And I was supposed to create workbooks for kindergarten students, K through 2, and one of the principals said to me, "Can you please put examples in there?" And I thought of the setting. The principal, it was in the Virgin Islands, of course, and I said, okay, I want kids to be able to read stories with their settings in there, with their experiences, with their fruits, with everything that they know. I wanted them to be able to have that experience. So I wrote this short 2-page story of Iyani, pretty short. And I just thought of a name that was, maybe one of my students, close to one of my students, and it just came. And I went ahead and I wrote the story thinking of what I wanted in there, which was simply an example. But then about 2 years later, I was just sitting at home and my mind just said, why don't you expand this story into a book? And I just sat and I went ahead and I just decided what I wanted in there. I thought of all the character traits that I wanted. And so that's why we have things like resilience and self-awareness, self-confidence, accountability. I deliberately decided what character traits I wanted in. I wanted to deal also with literary devices, because as a language arts teacher, I wanted to make sure that if a teacher decided to read my book in their class, they had literary elements that they could focus on. So yes, Iyani it came about, but at the same time, it was well thought out as well.
I love that. Now, did the Adventures of Gianni, did they come to you like all at once? For so many people, when they're writing, they've done like an outline and they know exactly what they want to talk about. But that tends to be for adult books. Be that this is a child's book, did you know that you wanted to send or have Iyani experience certain things, or did it kind of develop as you were writing?
I'd say both, because the first version I wrote of Iyani was 2 pages. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end. Iyani was in Westworld. She had an incident. She fell into a truck, and then she ended up she was on the east, She ended up on the west. So that's basic what I had. And I decided I had to fill it in. So if I was going to make it into a children's book, I had to fill in what happened between when she, at the beginning of what I had. And so I did go about outlining, but sometimes it was more, okay. And another thing was my experiences, of course, are part of that. So it's a mixture of, it's not all imaginary. It's pretty, lots of experiences from what I've experienced, from what I've seen in my classrooms, from what I've seen living in the community. All of those things came together to just form that whole Iyani story. And of course, I met students. Like one little boy said to me, when I read a book, I want to be able to create the picture in my mind. And so with all of that consciousness, I started making sure I would go back in and I would see, is that descriptive enough? Do I have enough descriptive words? Is it? And so I listened to students, what they wanted in books, and I kept going back each time to just, make it what they would like.
Right. So with the setting, there may be someone who's saying, well, Dr. Watts, you put it in the Caribbean. Why didn't you make it stateside? So my question is, does it matter where you reside? Will it affect you one way or the other with how you understand or can visualize the book?
Not at all. So Iyani, although Iyani is set in the Caribbean, all the themes in there are universal. So two things can happen. A person from the mainland who is reading Iyani can do one of two things. They can actually go ahead and look up the Virgin Islands. They can find out if those places are real. Like one of my readers said, she said, I actually looked it up. I had a virtual tour of the Virgin Islands. So that is one.
That's awesome.
Yes, she said to me, I had a virtual tour of the Virgin Islands. So she said, the places are real, the trees are real, the plants are real. And so she was able to see that everything was real. But at the same time, when she applied it to her classroom, she had her students look for trees where she resided. What trees are native to Florida? What animals are prominent in Florida? And so people can apply to wherever they live. It doesn't matter where they live, because students everywhere need resilience, they need perseverance, they need self-control, they need self-confidence. All of the themes are universal, and they can be applied anywhere, whether the person is in on the coast of Africa, or they're in the inland, wherever they are, or they're in Brazil, which is where Iyani's ancestors came from. Wherever they are, concepts are applicable.
I love it. As you were sharing that, I was thinking, what an awesome way to teach the children how to be self-aware of being able to compare and contrast and go, oh, wow, she has a tree like that, and we have trees like this, or she does that, and we do that too, to be able to put yourself in the story. I love it. That is awesome. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about the themes that you chose. Are there any particular themes that you portrayed or you wish to portray in the series, and why are you choosing those particular themes?
Awesome. So one of the things I paid attention to, social emotional is a big issue right now in schools. Students are so sensitive. They are very, we talk about bullying. It's because students are just so sensitive. And also some are sensitive and some are not sensitized to other people's feelings at all. So I have here in a section in the book where Iyani is the beginning, actually, the beginning of chapter 1. Iyani is walking towards her friends with a flower in her hair, and they do not know why she's wearing a flower on her head, and so they are saying things. One is saying, oh, she just feels patriotic, and her other friend says, oh, she just wants to be seen, and the other one says, oh, she just wants the boy, Jan. She just wants Jan to notice her. But Iyani, what she does, she just hisses. She hisses in disgust. It's like, here they go again, and she just dismisses everybody. So here it is. Because Iyani is self-aware, she knows that they're trying to make her upset, and she can just go ahead and just go off on them. But she chooses instead to it's like, okay, I'm not going to take you all on today, and she walks away. And so this here is just the whole idea that Iyani, although she's self-confident, she's also aware that, hey, these girls, what they've just said is about to make me upset, and if I just go towards them or I just take them on, I'm going to be, all of the things that we're not supposed to be. Another thing is, in the group, the girls have their codes of conduct, that before they say something, they have to think about it. Is it fair? Is it kind? And how would I feel if it's said to me? But when they're telling those things to Iyani, they're not even thinking of their codes of conduct. So it's just to show students that even sometimes we make promises. I mean, you can think of it in marital relationships. You can think of it in community norms and mores. We make promises, but sometimes we forget. We allow our feelings to take over, and then we break all of the promises that we make. We say things that we're not supposed to say. And so this is an instance where these girls have vowed that they would question, they would think before they speak. Is it kind? Is it fair? How would I feel if it said to me? But they did. Right. So that's one of the areas where one of the themes that I was really deliberate in. Resilience is another one. Iyani, and perseverance. So perseverance, Iyani.
Dr. Marcella, I'm so sorry to cut you off. It is almost time for us to go to break. And before we do that, I would love for you, if you could please, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
My book is The Adventures of Gianni. It is actually a series. The first one is The Adventures of Gianni, The Voyage West. The second one in the series is The Adventures of Gianni, The Incredible Beginning. You can find me at Buddin, Buddin, writers at gmail.com or buddinwriters.com, which is my...
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. Back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Now, Dr. Martha, I have to ask you about Iyani just a little bit more. I love what you're doing here, and I want for people to make sure that they understand that you really put thought into writing your book and to helping our little ones. Now, Iyani is set in the Caribbean in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, but how can readers in the U.S. mainland or in other parts, let's say they're in our heartland, how can they enjoy the story to the best? Now, you gave us an example about the teacher, and I think that's awesome sauce. But what if you purchase this, you're just a parent, and you decide to purchase this just on the shopping trip? How should those students or those children best enjoy your book?
Quite a few things. It's going to open a door for research, number one, because I was speaking to some adults, and they're like, what is soursop? What is kennips? So there are fruits in there that they probably never heard in their area, or they might look it up and say, oh, we have that fruit, but we call it by another name. And so what it's doing is, one of the things, Dr. Angela, is that we have a system where we spend so much energy on teaching students skills that we tend to spend less time and effort on knowledge. And so I remember being at a school a few years ago, and we were on a field trip with my students from the Virgin Islands, and these were the Catholics. These were bright students. And they asked my students, did you all drive to come here? So I felt terrible because I'm here. Look, obviously these kids have not conceptualized that if you live on an island, the only way you can get off that island is by a boat or a plane. And they were asking my students if they drove to come to the mainland state where we were. So the whole idea of just reading things that are outside of your setting, they will give you that knowledge base that you need to be able to develop that background knowledge when you come to take tests and do all of those things. And one of the things I want to applaud homeschooling parents for is that they are not restricted to curriculum. They will introduce their students to almost anything. And that's why these students do well, because their parents give them the opportunities to read things from different cultural settings. They're not going to say, oh, well, that's not on our book reading list, like general schools will say. They will allow their students to read almost any and everything. I was speaking to a lady who takes care of about 12 or so homeschooling students. And she said when she realized in her social studies lesson that the students could not conceptualize that the Caribbean islands were separate, she literally gave each student one island to research during their geography lesson as a homeschooling team. Now, think of the public school system. They will only teach what the curriculum states, not what they feel students should know. So the whole idea of Iyani, yes, it is set in the Caribbean, but it will give parents an opportunity to introduce their students to other cultures, other fruits, other trees, plants that are indigenous to other places, and of course, they can apply that to the setting that they live in.
I love it. As I was listening to your answer, it made me think about how people have a tendency to think that everyone does what they do, or they live the way they live, or they talk the way they talk, or dress the way they dress, because that's the context in which you formulate your thoughts of, wow, everyone must be doing what I'm doing because we all live in this community. And what a beautiful way of asking the students or the reader to kind of stretch a little bit and go to that next step. Poor kids, I can see how they're like, wow, you drove all the way here from the island? That's a really far drive. Not understanding that that's not how that works. But I do, in their innocence in asking the question. I love that. Now, how can a parent and a school a teacher work together? Is there anything that they can do if a teacher is utilizing your book in the classroom? Is there a way for the parent to kind of have a follow-up or homework to help the student or the child continue on that on the ride that you've given them, the imagination ride that you've brought to them?
Awesome. So here's what quite a few things teachers and parents can do. So the aspect I addressed a while ago was just the cultural aspect, knowing other cultures, other foods. For example, one of the boys when I told him I was writing a story on the islands, he said, oh, if you live on the island, you pretty much only eat coconuts. So I realized that there was a misconception again that island people only had coconuts to interact with. So that was something that it helps derail misconceptions. But another way parents can help, and teachers can also help too, is by looking at literary devices. Because as a language arts teacher, I was deliberate in making sure that I had similes, metaphors, quite a bit of them in there, where we had those cultural and as well as even animals that are not even native or present on the island. So I had comparisons to a chameleon. I had comparisons to a cheetah. And I also had comparisons to a butterfly that changes. So I kind of made sure that people would be able to relate no matter where they are. I also have comparisons to gymnastics. We don't do gymnastics on the islands, but we also have comparisons to stilt dancers. Stilt dancers are what we call moko jumbies in some of the islands. So we have those both. So I wanted it to be where anybody who chose to read that book would have questions they can ask. One of the other concepts in there is immigration. Iyani in the second book is very curious. She's asking her mom, so if Brazil is so sweet with all those tall trees and big rivers, why are we here? And these are questions that students ask their parents. We have a lot of immigrant parents in the States or wherever they live, and they may have questions. How did we get here? If where you came from was so sweet, why are we here? And these are questions parents are going to have to answer for generations.
And I like how you're saying that with culture, it opens up and allows for conversation about culture, because for so many people, they are here stateside from a different place, and for some, their family has moved from one part of the country to another part of the country. Perhaps you were born and raised on the East Coast, and now you find yourself raising your family on the West Coast, or vice versa. Right. So there are so many different things. Even being in the United States, moving to another state, it can be very similar to the culture shock that you experience moving from one country to another country, just because people are so incredibly different. I love that. What a wonderful way of opening up the eyes of little ones. I have to admit, I'm so glad that my parents exposed us to the cultural diversity of the world, and in explaining how we are more alike, though there are things that make us different, these are the things where we overlap, and look at how we are all of one breath. I love that you're doing that. Now, your series, The Adventures of Gianni. I love the title. What is your overall vision, Dr. Martha, for the series that you have?
I am dreaming like really big, Dr. Angela. I would love I am about to work on the middle book, which is The Cause. And The Cause is going to focus more on all of those things that I would like Iyani to advocate for. And then I'm going to have The Mint, which is the last one. But what I would like is for Iyani to become an animated icon in the Caribbean. I would love to be able to have a cartoon that Iyani would have a series that never ends. It would just be a cartoon that tells people about Caribbean people, Caribbean culture, Caribbean contributions. I mean, just think about how much we contributed to world history. We contributed to World Wars I, II, and so many of the wars we contributed to. We've contributed significantly to a lot in this world, and I just want Iyani to be able to let people know that we have been very instrumental to society from a long time ago. And if she could become an animated movie, I would love that. So that's my dream.
I can imagine. Listen, if for the people who have created Dora the Explorer, it all started with a thought, with a concept, with a passion and a desire. So you never know how the Lord is going to, open those doors. I think that is a wonderful, wonderful idea. And you're right, we do not have a lot of cultural cartoons that are exploring the various backgrounds and cultures that our people come from. And I mean the people that make up our beautiful nation. We all have a story, and to be able to share that with other little ones, I think it'll help them understand, make them understand a little bit more about the people that are around them and how beautiful everyone is in their own right. I love it. Now, last question about your series that you have here, and then I want to ask you some questions just about your process, about how you write and all that good stuff. But before we get to that, Dr. Martha, I wanted to ask you, in reading your bio, one of the things that, and readers, of course, listeners, you can go to her website and you can read it as well. One of the things that you state in your bio is that you have written in other aspects as far as education is concerned. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you. I created a process called the Writing to Respond process. And it happened in my classroom in the 10th grade, when I was teaching a 10th grade class, where I gave my students an opportunity to write in response to what they read, and they all asked me how. And I went ahead and I just jotted 5 steps down, and it became a school-wide phenomenon. When it became a school-wide phenomenon, I decided to publish it. And other schools have used it since. And what I noticed was once it became a habit, schools began to bring up their ELA scores, their language arts scores. And so from then I wrote the first one, which is Writing to Respond, Cultivating a Habit. And then I wrote Writing to Respond to Text and Test, because I realized once I moved to Florida, there was such a focus on testing. And my students needed that kind of help. So I went ahead and wrote the new version with Writing in Response to Text, and they had tips for writing in response to test prompts as well. And then one of my schools that I supported said, we want workbooks. And so I created 3 workbooks for the students 6 to 12, grades 3 to 5, and K through 2. Actually, now as we're speaking, I'm working on one workbook for pre-K to K, because I realize there are some concepts that they need to develop more. So it's all about developing critical thinking. How does a child respond to a book? For example, do you agree with, Or what could you do to change such and such? So it's all of those higher order thinking questions that sometimes we just focus so much on what's happening in the text. So the writing to respond process encourages kids to go beyond the text. So for example, in Iyani's case, she gets lost at the end. It's like I would ask a kindergartner, how would you help Iyani prepare for her next steps? So we're getting them to think problem solving. Or if I were to ask them what plants are native to Florida, I am getting them to do some research. Or if I ask questions, how could you compare Iyani to someone who missed the bus one day? So I am asking them to do analysis. So all of these questions, and that's one of the things, is that the Adventures of Gianni can be read anywhere if they decide to use the writing to respond process to encourage them to develop those critical thinking skills and also to just explore. And so that is the other aspect of my life, which is really trying to encourage schools to improve reading and writing across content, not just in language arts. And so my dream in that area is that I can help. I usually work with schools in disadvantaged settings, and they have poor scores and they need to bring it up. I try to help them understand that it's about cultivating habits. If we can cultivate the habits, then we can get them to do well.
I love it. If we can cultivate the habit, then we can get them to do well. I love it. Well, Dr. Martha, it is time for us to take a break. But before we do, can you remind everyone again, what is the title of your children's series? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
Awesome. So my book, The Adventures of Gianni by Aunty Marcella. And we have the Voyage West and also The Incredible Beginning. They can be found on Amazon or at Ingram's Park or on my website, Buddinwriters.com. Buddinwriters is Buddin with no G.com. And you can also find us on Facebook, or you can shoot us an email and we can mail you a copy to you if you so desire.
I love it. Well, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester, and I am talking to Dr. Martha Joseph Watts today about her series, her children's book series, The Adventures of Gianni. And thank you again, Dr. Martha, for talking about those things that are important: friendship, perseverance, resilience, independence, accountability, migration, community, and caring for others, all while on an adventure. And I love how you have made sure that the children pick up on those things but still have a fun time while they do it. Now, I wanted to ask one more question about your book, and that is that it is by Aunty Marcella. Can you tell me who is Aunty Marcella?
Thank you. Aunty Marcella is the person I knew from age whenever I knew my name up till age 12. And so when I found out why my name was Marcella, my aunt, she named me Marcella. But surprisingly, even if they called me Marcella, it never made it to my birth certificate. So in my home country, we would write the common entrance exam. And so I was 12 years old when I went to take that exam. And so I passed to go to high school. And from that time on, I was supposed to be called Martha. But before then, I knew I had another name, but I didn't. If somebody had called me Martha, I would never have responded. So at home, so in my community, everybody knows me as Marcella. At home, every family member calls me Marcella, and so all my nieces and nephews call me Aunty Marcella. So I said, since this is a children's book, I might as well just dedicate it to them. And the best way I could let them know that it's really dedicated to them it say that it's by Aunty Marcella. All of my nieces, even the ones that are married, they still call me Aunty Marcella. Nobody calls me Martha or Aunty Martha. It's Aunty Marcella. Right.
I love it. And, you know, it is, like you said, I think it was very wise of you to put it like that, because it's like a forever dedication to those who love you, and family know you by that name. So it's like, wow, look at what she's doing. And it's like, awesome. I love it. Well, yeah. I would like to kind of shift gears just a little bit, because I like to ask questions that not only do I think that our listeners want to know about, but sometimes those listeners are also aspiring authors themselves. And they not only want to pick your brain about your book, but about your process. So the next few questions I have for you are strictly about your process. So my question is, when you're writing, Dr. Martha, do you find that writing exhausts you? Does it energize you? Or is it kind of a little bit of both?
I think it energizes me. And my process, I've heard other authors talk about waking up to write things because it's nagging. And my process is like that. So I would feel, I would have an idea and it's just nagging. It's like, until I put it down, it doesn't go away. And sometimes I would just write it down because I want the nagging to stop. And then maybe a few weeks later, or maybe a month or two later, I'd have a nagging again. And I'd go ahead and I'd write it down thinking it's a new idea. But then when I read my journal, I was like, oops, that idea was there before. So a lot of times it's just, yes. So I have a lot of reoccurrences happening because once I don't complete it, it's like my brain has a way of just bringing it back and say, okay, you didn't do that. And just recently, actually, I'm working on something for in the education, which is Dr. Martha Watt, which is how to implement, programs in schools. Mm-hmm. And I started it last year and I put it away. And then this year I felt like, oh my God, I put up paper and I wrote everything else because I'm so excited it's new. But then I started flipping through one of my journals and I'm like, oops, it's already there. I just call it a different something. so the whole, for me, the process is it comes and then it nags until I get rid of it. So if I don't, then it just comes back again another time. And for example, the second book that I wrote it in 8 days. But I wouldn't say that I wrote it in 8 days. I would say that it's been settling in my mind for a whole year. I just never sat to write it down. And so when I travel on the plane, I do a lot of writing on the plane. So on the plane, I would pick up that paper, whatever I have, and I would outline. I would say, okay, chapter 1 will be this. This is going to be the focal point of chapter 1, chapter 2. But it's not something that I am forcing at that time. It's like it's been there, and I'm just making time to put it down. And so I would say that writing for me is beautiful. It just, it comes. When it comes, I cannot ignore it when it comes.
Right. Now, for someone who, again, they're thinking about being a writer, do you think that someone who is choosing to step off and be a writer or to become an author, that they need to feel strongly about whatever it is that they're writing? I guess my question is, there's a difference between you may know something and you have all of the facts, but then there's something that you feel very strongly, very passionately about, but you only have 3 bits of truth before you, but you still feel very strongly about those 3 pieces. Do you think that it's important to have more than just the facts to be passionate about your writing as well?
Not at all. I say to people, write. Write. Revisit it. Revisiting is so important because when you write something and you set it down for a while, you go back to it, you will find that you're getting new ideas. You will get to expand it. When I wrote the Writing to Respond process, which is my educational books, I had 1 book. And I remember getting that word that it was going to be more. And I'm like, it's just 1 book. But now it's like I have 8 resources from that 1 book. I did not have all of those ideas. I have an educational resource for schools where you have teachers who are going on. They leave very often. I mean, teachers leave, So there's something for when you have a new teacher. All of those things came. I never sat and had everything one time. So write those 2 pieces of ideas down. Whatever it is you have, acknowledge it, own it, write it down, and then revisit it. When you revisit, you will get other things to add to it. And I remember one of the biggest hindrances I had before writing, because I tried writing before. I have poems, like maybe a book of poetry that I never published. I have fiction for adults that I never published. And one of the things that held me back was, what will the readers say? What will reviewers say? We think of what people will say, and we allow that to hold us back. Well, guess what? I had to tell myself, reviewers need something to review. So I am going to write. So we want to make sure that we do not defeat ourselves before we even begin writing. And that is one of the things, one of the fears or the phobias that people have for not beginning the process. They're worried about what people are going to say, what the reviewers are going to say. Your book is not for everybody. But somebody's going to pick up that book and they're going to get inspired. So go ahead and write, because you might be writing for one person, maybe one person that's not even in your setting. It might be somebody where Amazon sells. Yes. So do not be intimidated. Yes.
I love that. Don't be intimidated. Go on and write. You don't know who that person is that you're writing for. I love that. Now, when do you think you figured out that language had power, be it that it was a spoken word or the written word? Do you recall there being a particular moment, or maybe there was an experience or something that happened that you said, you know what, language is awesome, and boy, does it have power?
I remember when I was a child, we had one little community library. It was a nun. There was that little room, and she had just books. And we were allowed to take a book on Saturdays or on weekdays after school. And one day I woke up actually remembering the smell of those books, because I think that's when I began just understanding the power of words. And I remember once at school we had also the series, Mr. Joe. And I just, right there and then, I just had this fascination with words and the series. And I'm like, somehow, somewhere deep inside, I just felt like I could do that one day. I didn't have it in those exact words, but I was always fascinated by just the idea that I could pick up the next level up and I could continue finding out what Mr. Joe did on his barn. And it was just powerful to just know that you could want something else. And just realizing that words can be so powerful and they can motivate people. It just happened that I said, okay, I can do that too, you know. When an iguana is crossing the street, the driver stops so that the iguana can stop. You go to one of the tourist bars, the iguanas are right there feeding from people. So the iguanas are it's like the society has accepted the iguana so much that I felt that the students would be able to relate to it. And one of the other reasons I use the iguana is that the iguana is not native to the Virgin Islands. The iguana came from South America. And yet still in the Virgin Islands, they have made the iguana an icon. I mean, if you go to any of the tourist shops, you're going to see the iguana. You're going to see some soft toys. You're going to see big posters with the iguana on there. So I use the iguana for that particular reason.
I love it. I love it. Well, you know what, Dr. Martha, our time is over, but let me tell you, I have enjoyed my morning with you today and all that you have shared with us, and I think that our listeners have as well. One last time, if you could, before I let you go, can you remind everyone what is the title of your series, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
All right, thank you very much. I just want to say one more thing. The iguana can also be found on every Caribbean island, and that's one of the reasons I picked her as well, because every island can associate with her. You can find Adventures of Gianni on Amazon, and you can also find it on my website, Buddinwriters.com. And if you have social media, you can follow me on Buddinwriters Dr. Watts on Facebook, Buddinwriters Dr. Watts on Instagram, Buddinwriters Dr. Watts on YouTube.
Thank you again for being on the show today. And listeners, thank you as well for tuning in and spending some time with me today. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you and your little ones to be their best today. As always, may you continue to have God's grace and mercy and His face to shine upon you. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.